Thank you, Valdi. And thank you to the Scientific Society for this opportunity. I am truly grateful to see all of you here tonight. It's raining. People have a lot of other things to do, eating pancakes and drinking red wine. But I have a few things to say that you may not like, or maybe you do, I don't know. But it's needed, as Valdi has already said, it is needed. It has been left unsaid for too long, and many, many children have suffered as a result thereof. I would like to start off by showing you a short video clip. Before I say anything about where I come from and why I do this, I would like to show you a short video clip just to get us all in the milieu abduction and child abuse all about. So let me see if the technology will allow us to play a short video clip.
Hello.
Hi, nice to meet you.
My name's Joe. I'm filming a social experiment. Now, how many times a day do you tell your kid not to talk to strangers?
I tell my kid every day.
All right. So if I go over to your kid right now, will he or she talk to me or run away?
I'm pretty sure she's not going to talk to you, but try.
All right. Which one's your kid? I'm going to put it to the test. I'm going to go over there with the puppy.
She's right there.
She's right over there?
And then Jane's after.
All right. I'm going to go over there and I'm going to talk to her as a stranger. All right? Hi.
Hi.
Look at the puppy.
Puppy.
Look at the puppy. Like the puppy?
Yeah.
Can you guess what her name is?
Duncan.
Duncan? You were close. Her name's Donuts. I got some more puppies. Want to go see the other puppies?
Yeah.
All right, let's go. Come on. Right over here. Give me a hand. My name's Joe.
I'm Christina.
I'm doing a social experiment on young kids. And how often do you tell your kid not to talk to strangers?
Every day.
Every day? So if I go over to your kid, will he or she talk to me or run back to you?
Probably run back to me.
All right, which one's your kid? You want me to put it to the test?
Oh, sure. He's over there playing.
Right over there? So if I go over with the puppy, he'll run back to you before talking to me.
Probably, yeah.
All right, so you give me permission to put it to the test?
Sure.
All right, I'm going to go do it. Hey, you like puppies? Look at the puppy. Guess what the puppy's name is? Donuts. Yeah. You like puppies, right? Want to go see the other puppies? I got a bunch of them. You want to go? All right, let's go. Come on. Hello. My name's Joe.
Hi, Joe.
I'm doing a social experiment on kids. How often do you tell your kids not to talk to strangers?
Often.
So if I go over to your kid right now as a stranger, do you think he or she will run back to you or continue to talk to me?
You'll be pretty convincing with that dog.
Yeah.
But I think we'll come back to it.
Would you give me permission to give it a shot to
Yeah.
see what happens? All right. Can you just point out which one's your kid? Right over here? All right.
Yeah.
Hi. The dog? It's a girl. Want to pet her? Nice, right? Want to go down the slide? You like the puppies, right? You like the puppies? Want to go see the other puppies? Yeah? Come on, let's go. Let's go see the other puppies. Let's go.
Just because you see somebody with a dog doesn't mean that you go home with them. Because you don't know him. The same way you don't know that person and you don't know that person. You have to ask me if you want to go see somebody. You know what's going to happen? You know what could happen? They could take you and you won't be with mommy anymore. Would you want that? Or do you love your family? All right.
Over 700 children are abducted a day. That's over 250,000 a year. Are your kids safe?
All right, just for the benefit of the Zoom participants, The experiment was basically very simple. This guy called Joe walks up to the mothers at the playground. Mothers are at the public playground. They are watching their kids playing. They are doing what any good parents should do, making sure their kids are safe. And then he introduces himself and he says, "Hi, my name is Joe. I'm doing a social experiment." And he asks the permission of the mother to talk to the child. He takes the puppy to the child. Child pets the puppy. He asks the child, "Do you want to see the other puppies?" Child takes his hand and walks with him. It's as easy as that. For those of you who have noticed, it's a 3-minute video. 3 kids in 3 minutes. And he spent most of his time talking to the mothers, not to the kids. And by the way, that's what most pedophiles do. That's what most child predators do. They talk more to the parents than to the child. Because you win the parent, you win the child. Right? So, the reason why he would not have gotten away with those kids was because the mothers were watching, right? Good mothers. However, how many of you have noticed what the mothers were doing the moment he introduced himself to them? The first one was busy with the baby in the pram. Don't know what she was doing, but there's a baby in the pram and she was fiddling with the baby. Her eyes were not on the child playing in the playground. The second one was on her cell phone. Even after he had introduced himself, she still took her eyes back to the cell phone to answer the last message or to just switch it off, or I don't know what. But she was on a cell phone. Only the third mother was actually watching the child. She was sitting with her hands in her lap, watching her child. She's the only one who would not have lost her child that day had Joe been a real child abductor. The first two, even though they were just a few meters from their kids, he spoke on average 15 seconds to each child. 15 seconds and the child is gone. And that's not the fastest way it can happen. I have another video where a woman at a, it's a security camera video, so it's a real life thing. Woman comes to the till to pay for her groceries. The lady gives her the wrong change. She starts arguing with the lady behind the till, the cashier. The guy takes the baby from behind her, from the shopping trolley, that little place where babies sit in the shopping trolley. Whoops, he goes. The baby was saved because of a security guard that was actually doing his job and not sleeping at the door. But that's how fast it can happen. So, but for the grace of God, it could have been me and my child or you and your child in that video. It happens like this. But that's child abduction. And unfortunately, it's only a small portion of what happens to children. And don't think, yes, the playground is now a dangerous place. Any place is good enough for an abductor. Why do they abduct kids? I could give you the full details, but you would have to give me confirmation that you have a counselor at hand before I do that. We've tested it on our prosecutors who work with these kind of cases. Not a single prosecutor who's been in service for more than 12 months did not test positive for post-traumatic stress syndrome. That's how bad it gets. And they are not involved. They're only working as professionals with these cases, right? So, by the way, while we are at the topic, we use terms like pedophile, abductor, child abuser, molester, and so on. and it can get very confusing. Now, if one of you happen to end up on one of my longer seminars, I may have the time to explain the difference in the terms to you. It's of no relevance, really. I prefer to use the term predator. So if I use the term predator tonight, then please remember it can be any kind of potential child abuser or child abuser. Most of the time, the first line, the first abduction is purely for money. Kids have value on some very dark and dangerous markets, and the kids are stolen, not by the person who's selling them. There's actually an auction house for human beings in Central Africa. We know it exists. The authorities of the relevant country, which I will not name now, is reluctant to get involved. We have video footage taken by a cell phone from someone who was there. It is there. It exists in our day and age. All right. So how much money is involved? What do they sell a child for? Kids under 5 years of age, 0 to 5 years, babies up to 5 years. Generally speaking, boys is between 20 and 30,000 Namibian dollars. That's what the guy who steals the child here gets. All right? Or the person who assists, like the lady behind the till. I don't know whether she was involved in that case, but she could have been. They actually pay that person a reasonable amount of money to give you the wrong change, just to get your attention away from the baby for a few seconds. Now, girls, on the other hand, are worth anything. Okay, boys, by the way, it's only age that matters to the price. Like race or skin color so has no influence. On girls, it's a little different. Different markets have different values for girls from different, mostly skin color. They don't care about cultural or racial background. It's the skin color that matters. And it's not always one way or the other. Some markets prefer darker skins, some markets prefer whiter skins. So for girls in the same age, 0 to 5 years, cases that I've personally worked with, the sum that the Namibian participant got was anything between 40 and 100,000 Namibian dollars. Now, you ask yourself, the person who looks after your child when you are not there or when you are busy, is it a housekeeper earning 20,000 a year? What would your housekeeper do for 5 years' salary? She doesn't have to steal a child or hurt the child. She just has to go to the toilet for 5 seconds and allow someone else to do it. She just has to turn her eyes away for a few seconds. That's how easy it is. So, predators are out there. We all know it. And unfortunately, the mechanisms to stop them are not very effective. I heard a comment earlier this evening that people will start asking for this kind of presentation once a child has been stolen in Namibia. I have bad news for you. Kids are being stolen in Namibia. All right, we have about 7 attempts per month. That's 2020 statistics. I don't have 21, the year of 21. But in 2020, the average was about 7 a month attempts. Luckily, in Namibia, public still get involved, and therefore we stop most of the attempts. But a few kids were lost. Some of those attempts were successful. All right. That is about child kidnapping or abduction. Those are also terms that get confused. We don't go into that for tonight. Kidnapping and abduction is the same thing, because if you're talking about a child under 18, it's more or less the same thing. All right. About myself, why am I doing this? It's normally women who are fighting for the rights of children. You'll find I actually lost a race for a position at the office of the ombudsman to a female colleague for that very same reason. People believe that the children's advocate should be female. I was happy for her. I went to her. She thought that I would be aggrieved because I actually had the better papers for the job, but I went and congratulated her and told her that I'll give her all the support I could, because I understand the notion of not only our colleagues in government, but of the public out there. You see a man trying to do child protection, it doesn't seem right. And me, myself, I would also frown upon that. So why am I doing it? Well, basically, my childhood was far from ideal. I grew up in very hard circumstances. I lost my mother at the age of 7 to a very traumatic event, very, very traumatic. Haunts me to this day. But at the same day, I also became responsible for my 3-year-old sister. Not that my dad didn't want to, but he had his hands full, taking care of 6 kids in the house, with no one to help him. And we were not rich people. I grew up rather poor. So my father did everything he could to put food on the table, but we were left to care for ourselves otherwise. And the other kids were too much older than us, so they didn't actually have the interest in the younger sister that I had. I was the closest to her. So I was 7 years old. I had to see that she had breakfast before she went to kindergarten. I had to make sure she got there safely and back in the afternoon. So I had to drop her off, then walk to my school. And so it went on until she went to school, and then I went to high school, and then I still had to walk one way and then the other way and back, and music lessons after school, and I'm doing rugby practice and this and that. So that was one part of it. Unfortunately, our family also has some bullies among the cousins, and we were the easy targets for them because there was no mother watching what happened to us. So I knew hardships as a child. And when I eventually grew up, well, I made it out of that. Not without scars, not without baggage, but I made it out of it. Then I met this wonderful woman sitting there at the back, my wife. I married her 33 years ago. We raised 3 kids together. And I realized that although very different, her childhood was even harder than mine, a lot harder. And so the two of us devoted our time to educate ourselves, to learn as much as we can about how to keep a child safe, how to bring up a child, giving that child the best possibilities, the best opportunities, without unnecessary risks, without the dangers that we faced. And when they were all grown up, we went on and we still educated ourselves even further. She studied nursing and later on teaching. She also did psychiatric nursing and community health, which made her the ideal person to get involved with kids. So we also got involved with kids of the family, other kids that we knew from people around where we knew that there were problems. The problem is when you start educating yourself on these facts, you start seeing things that other people don't. And then you have to get involved. So here we are. I went on, study law, became a prosecutor, prosecuted all the bad guys who did all these bad things. But it's not the facts of the case on the docket that caused me trauma, and that's still causing me nightmares. It's speaking to the mother, the grandmother, the teacher, whoever was there and was supposed to keep that child safe, and simply failed, not because she wasn't doing her job, but because she didn't see it coming. It happens under our noses. We've been talking about child abduction up to now. Unfortunately, that's only 1% of what happens to children. 99% of child abuse happens in our houses, in our churches, in our schools, all around us, right under our noses. And we don't see it because we don't know. Once you know what to look for, you can see it because there's a process involved. You can't run to a child and start abusing a child if there's a lot of grown-ups around. But you can groom that child into coming to you, letting you do things. You can groom that child in the presence of all of you, and you won't notice. I have so many examples of a child that was groomed by a grandfather, a father, an uncle, right in the living room with the rest of the family present. Grooming is a process almost like adults dating. You get to know each other, you get closer, you cross certain boundaries until it gets to a sexual relationship. Predators do the same thing with children. They do the same thing. The child never feels threatened. The child never fears until it's too late, way too late. And then they can't turn back because they've participated for too long. Oh, they'll tell me. Most mothers say, my child will tell me. No, she won't. You think she will? Have you told your mother about your first sexual experience? Let me pick on you. You're young enough to remember it. No, you don't tell your mother about your sexual experiences, do you? Right? We don't. And that's why they succeed. Because the kids don't talk. Okay. You can go on. In this slide, I don't know how clear it is, but it gives an indication of the different types of child abuse that we see in the world. By the way, I'm going to mention numbers and statistics. I've already mentioned abduction is only 1%. Isdor, if you switch off that light, do you have something for me here? Please, man. If I can't read my notes, I'm going to mess this up. All right. I've already mentioned that abduction makes out only 1% of the child abuse cases that we see. Now, if you look at these pictures, these are the 4 broad categories. We have the human market, the kids that are being sold mostly as sex slaves, if it's girls. We don't know a lot about boys because boys don't talk, cowboys don't cry. So it's very hard to get information from the male part of the population. If you hand out a list here with a few private questions and it's anonymous and whatever, you'll find all the women will complete it to the best of their ability. The men will send in blank lists. Or they'll just say no, 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 no to everything. So we don't know a lot about men, but we know a lot about the girls. So that's what happens to most girls who are abducted. They become sex slaves for as long as they are pretty enough and young enough and so on for that industry. The picture right beneath that, the one in the left corner, the child making bricks, that's child labor. Most boys end up in that kind of market. There are also predators who prefer boys as sex slaves, so that's not out of the question. But boys end up in slave market. Why kids? Why don't they abduct adults to do their hard work for them? They don't care how many bricks the child makes in a day. That child is not going to rebel and fight back and run away. He's too young. He doesn't know how. He just does what he's told to do by the adult. He's also very cheap to maintain. He doesn't eat a lot in a day. All right? So that's what happens to boys. Other forms of abuse is domestic violence in the right-hand corner beneath. Of the child abuse cases, I would say roughly 1/3 have an element of domestic violence. The domestic violence part is normally not the one that is reported to the police or gets to court or whatever. It's normally the sexual part, which is the picture on top, right? Sexual abuse comes to light, often many, many years later. It's in many instances not at the time of the abuse that it comes to light. Only times when it comes to light is when something incidental happens that wasn't planned and someone else knows about it. The child doesn't talk at that stage. Or when a girl falls pregnant and she has to explain who was the father. Now, a little bit of statistics. These two slides on the left, that's the abduction 1%, right? The two on the right, that's the 99% of child abuse, unfortunately. How many kids get abused and where does it happen? Is it only in lower income groups? Is it only among certain cultures or what? You have some very arrogant people who will tell you, no, those people in Blikkiesdorp or in Okahanya Park, yeah, go there. You'll find it there. No, it's not where you find it. You find it everywhere. Yes, you do find it in your informal settlements, but you also find it behind the high walls of Ludwigsdorf. And you find it in Kleine Kuppe, and you find it in Rocky Crest, and Otjimuze, and everywhere. It's all over the country, cities, small towns, farms, it's all over. It's in Britain, it's in Europe, it's in the Philippines, it's in the US. There's no place on earth where kids are not being abused. Generally speaking, the statistics are more or less the same. There are some surveys that are being done every 5 years by the Women and Child Protection Unit of Scotland Yard, Great Britain. They have a very sophisticated team of police officers, investigators, social workers, and so on. And they really do a great job in providing us with statistics on this. I've worked with a number of them. We've given presentations together and so on. It turns out, worldwide, and we've tested it in Namibia, there's been a survey by the United Nations among 17-year-old girls. We have the same statistics as the rest of the world. It turns out only 1 out of 3 girls turns 18 without any attempt to sexually molest her. Another one was only an attempt or a very slight molestation. But 1 out of 3 girls, by the time she turns 18, has suffered serious sexual abuse or rape, which leaves marks, which leaves trauma which she will carry for the rest of her life. You can learn to live with it, but you don't get rid of it. So, after 30 years of prosecution, I've realized that you will never win this battle by prosecuting the bad guys. The only way I hope that we can possibly make a difference is by sharing more information with the people who can possibly prevent the child abuse. There is a program sponsored by the United Nations, UNICEF in particular, the United Nations Children's Fund, for teachers. I don't know if it's still running, though. It was running up to last year. But I think the sponsor money ran out. There's also, I've been head of the training program for prosecutors, magistrates, police officers, and social workers. I myself was trained by the Child Witness Institute in South Africa. They are probably the most advanced institute in the world today, because they have 27 years of experience with psychologists, prosecutors, and social workers that deal only with abused kids. They have no other work. I don't know how they cope with it. I hope each of them has a counselor to talk to, but that's what they've been doing for the last 27 years. So I went for all the trainings that they offer. I have the 3 certificates that you can possibly get from them. And therefore, I became the head of the Namibian team to train professionals. And I'm very happy to do that. Any of you have a group of teachers or social workers or whoever who would be interested, I'm happy to do that. Let's look at the next slide. Thank you. You cannot view any person or any child in isolation. We are part of a herd. We are part of a group. We are in a society, we are in a country, we are in a specific world. And that's what we call the ecological approach. It means these systems that you are part of has an influence on you as a person. It has an influence on your vulnerability to abuse. I'll give you a few examples. Let me just shortly explain what the systems mean. The big one on the outside is the macro system. That's now international conventions, the country's constitution, the cultural system within which you live. The big things out there that kids don't know anything about, they just hear about it, but it has an influence on them. Global pandemics like COVID-19 is typically part of your macro system. Now, what influence could COVID-19 have on the vulnerability of a child to abuse? Anyone with an idea? Yeah, wonderful. Most 70% of all sexual abuse happens in the family, right? Only 30% that's from outsiders. 70% is in your family circle. So that's a good example. Anyone else? What about the time they spent on the internet? I'll get to online abuse in a minute. But kids get terribly abused online, or they get groomed online for someone to meet them in the real world. So the time that they spend online is putting them at risk, right? When you go online, we're all online here now, you are sharing cyberspace with, at any given time, 750,000 predators who are searching for vulnerable kids. They are there, they're on the internet. They make their money from it, so they don't go off, they are there. So it's not 750,000 predators in the world, it's 750,000 online at any given moment. There's been a test done from the Netherlands where they posted a fake profile of a young girl on the internet. And the responses that they get, that's where these figures come from. Right. So the second circle is the exo circle. That's now policies. The school says you have to wear a certain type of uniform, or the government says you can't go without a mask. Those kind of policies that can have an influence. It also includes like court orders and so on. Like in case of a divorce, the court will say child stays with the mother, but every second weekend with the father, and every second school holiday with the father, and so on. Those kind of orders doesn't have any direct contact with the child. However, it impacts on the vulnerability of the child. If the father is a drunkard and he has a lot of drunk friends at his place every weekend, the child is vulnerable when visiting the father. Okay. The third circle, the inner one, micro, that is the child himself, herself, the level of cognitive development, the family of the child, the school he or she goes to, everything, everyone who is in direct contact with the child makes out the inner circle, the micro. All right, so it's just a broad indication. Now, let's say, does anyone have an example of vulnerability due to the inner circle of the child? Obviously, if you have an abuser in your family, you're vulnerable, okay? But also, the level of development, let's take that. If you have a child who is slow in cognitive development, it will be much longer before the child is able to talk, all right? So that's the impacts of environment. Let's go to the next one. Child development. Oh, sorry, I've said that already. Child development. One of the first psychologists to study and record child development was Jean Piaget, and many of the later writers have built their understanding of child development on his theory. In the meantime, there are much more complicated theories, but this was very simple. And I like to refer just to a few things. We're not going to do child development now. We don't have time for that. The teachers will tell you it takes much longer. But anyway, what he found by studying his own children is that children use two things to understand the world, mostly two things: assimilation, accommodation. Now, the assimilation part is very easy. Before I get to that, it's very important for a child to follow the normal steps of development. Not at a specific pace. Some kids develop faster, some are slower. But if they skip a stage, or they regress from a higher developmental stage back to a lower one, then there's a problem. There's something definitely wrong there. So child development is very important to understand. And in our longer presentations, which I will explain at the end, we do take the time to go into child development for as far as it is necessary to understand the concept. So that is one part. The assimilation is what we call monkey see, monkey do. Kids see things from the grown-ups and they do it, right? So if you see sexual behavior in the child, it could be that the child saw it on television or physically from grown-ups, especially where you have families living in a one-room shelter or something like that. Or it could be that the child has been abused and is acting out what he or she was taught to do by the predator. How to know the difference? Unfortunately, I can't give you that in a few minutes. For the professionals, I do it, but it takes 5 days. But there is a way to tell the difference. If you're seasoned in that, if you've done it a lot of times, it takes only a few minutes to tell the difference. It's rather easy. Then the other part is accommodation. Accommodation is what I normally refer to it's a repetition thing. Why do we all wear clothes? Why are none of us naked here tonight? It's not because the government says so. It's because your mom dressed you when you were a baby and you grew up being dressed all the time. Kids like running around naked. Most kids, if you leave them after a bath or so, they'll just run naked through the house. I'm talking about your toddlers. But they get so used to getting dressed all the time that when they grow up, they start doing it for themselves. Unfortunately, also a fact that's being terribly abused by the predators, and the repetition of certain acts is then later on seen and done by the child as if it's her own choice. And what do we do if we see an 11-year-old girl flirting with 50-year-old men? What do we do? Who do we blame? The girl, of course. What a slut. Did her mother not teach her better manners? But where did she learn that? She's not supposed to be at that level of development yet. Who taught her those things? Have we ever asked that question? Next thing. By the way, the repetition of acts that's being done to you is not limited to sexual acts. It's also violence, bullying, those kind of things. If you go back, kids who do that at school, you go back, you see that it's been done to them as well. Trauma. Why do we want to prevent any form of child abuse? Because it causes trauma. And what does trauma do? Trauma influences the way the child develops in a negative way. In our courses or seminars, we deal with the general impacts of trauma. There are 14 of them. Not a single one is positive. They are all 14 negative impacts. And it's anything from low self-esteem, post-traumatic stress disorder, up to self-harm, depression, suicide, even multiple personalities and dissociation and those kind of things. It's all negative. There's absolutely nothing positive coming out of trauma. Some people say, oh, a little trauma is okay. The child will grow tougher. All right? Let's compare it to a tree that you plant in your garden. You plant a young tree in your garden. This eye. Now, you know that your area has strong winds. We are actually in Windhoek, are we not? So you want the tree to grow stronger. Are you going to chop it with an axe to make it stronger? Chopping it with an axe will either kill it or break it to such an extent or damage it to such an extent that the first wind will break it. It might not die. It might grow again from under the wound. But it's not going to be a tree anymore. It's going to be a bush. Now look around you. Is our society full of bushes or full of trees? We have very few trees in our societies. We have bushes. People coping with society rather than people who are thriving and throwing fruits and shadow for the rest of society. Okay? So there are things that toughens up a child, just like the tree. Just leave it out in the wind. That's normal hardships of a tree, is wind. Strong wind blows against your young tree, it will grow stronger roots. It will anchor itself. Ants may nibble at its trunk, sand may blow against it, it will grow thicker bark. That's the way it toughens up. It will become a tough tree. With children, the same thing. There are normal hardships for kids. Don't shield your kids from the hardships. It's okay. Let them feel the normal hardships of life. That's going to toughen them up. What are the normal hardships for a child? Just going to school for the first time is a hardship. Failing a test. All right? If He or she is a good athlete, breaking an ankle 2 days before the nationals. Those are hardships. Grandma may pass away. Those are the hardships that will toughen up the child. Don't shield the child from that. Let the child deal with it. Support, yes, but don't shield. But don't traumatize a child. A serious car accident is not going to make your child any better, right? It's going to make the child paranoid or anything else, but not better, not tougher. Next. I have mentioned the concept of grooming. Now, grooming, in short, is the process by which the predator takes his target from a target to a victim. And that's the only time and place where you, if you have enough information and if you have the skills, could realize that something is going wrong and could intervene. Because the last stage of, actually the second last stage of grooming, the fifth one, is transition to sexual contact. Once you get to that stage, the child is a victim. It's no longer a target, right? Now we have to start doing restorative programs, no longer preventative programs. It's not the end of the world. There are things that can be done, but it's something that you'll have to live with. If you can stop before that, even in the relationship forming stage, you can save that child all the trauma, literally all the trauma. The child will not feel any trauma, will not experience the scars from trauma if you can stop it before the transition to sexual contact. But then you need to be able to know the signs. Because as I've said, these things don't happen in the quiet far away. You can't just keep your child away from bad people. It's not good enough. It happens right under your nose. Okay? We have people who go into certain professions like teaching or gymnastic trainers and karate instructors and even pastors and preachers. They go study to get in that position so that they have access and the trust of the people. Not every preacher, not every teacher, not every instructor. Thank God there are only a few bad ones. Most are good ones, but how will you know? There are ways, you cannot always know, but you can empower your child so that the child knows where the limits are. And that's going to save one child. All right? So, I have a 3-hour presentation that I'll talk later about. I spent most of that time just on the grooming topic, because that to me is the most important one. If you understand that concept, you understand how it's being done, who are the people who are likely to do it, what signs you should look for. There are certain trademarks of predators. There are certain things that they do that the usual member of society does not do. If you can identify that, then you can stop it before it's too late. As I've said, we also have programs for restorative actions, should you notice that it has gone too far. Let me just stop at this point. If any of you who are working with kids or who have kids of your own, if any of you suspect that something is wrong with a child, if you don't have the skills, please do not attempt to get the information from the child. Get someone who's been trained to do it. There are a lot of them. I have personally trained more than 1,000 Namibian experts. Almost half of them were social workers. So I can give you numbers of people who can do it. I myself can do it. There are a lot of people who can talk to a child and get accurate information because it's so easy to get the wrong information from a child if you approach them in the wrong way. But those skills can be taught. It is possible. If you want to learn those skills, you can also talk to me. Right, we are talking about different types of abuse and different types of grooming. As I've said before, there is the real life or offline abuse that we all know about. But then there's also online abuse and online grooming. Now, online grooming is mostly where a predator would approach a young child online, mostly teenagers, but also younger children. But teenagers spend a lot of time online, so they are easily falling prey to this. Approaching them online with the idea of meeting them in person later on. The predator would typically pose himself as a young boy of the same age as the girl, and then lure her into a meeting somewhere. Or the predator could also be posting as an adult, but offering counseling services, offering bursaries, offering help with certain subjects, and so on. So whenever your child finds extra classes for science or maths or whatever, make sure you know the person before you let the child go there. All right, let's go to the stages of grooming. I'm just going to run through the different stages. Predators don't target any child. They have certain things, and there's a very good survey called the Elliott survey, where the researchers actually went to convicted predators who are serving life sentences. And they asked them, most of them are very open about it because they're already serving a life sentence. They don't have anything to lose. Who was your target and why did you target these kids? Remember, by the time a predator gets convicted, he has hundreds, if not thousands, of victims, because it's not the first one that will report. It might be 40 years later that a woman who is then in her 50s goes and reports that this guy did this to me, and I can see he's doing it to other kids. That's mostly what they do. We have the recent one that was in the newspapers about the Swakopmund guy, a foreigner that bought a house in Swakopmund, and his daughter came from, I don't know where. She came here, reported to the police that this guy, and the daughter was in her late 40s. She said, this guy is a child abuser. He abused me and my sister, and I don't know how many other kids. But he was never reported before that. So how many kids has been abused by him? All right. So what these guys said is that they have certain things that they look for. They look for instance, problems in the home, or kids who are a very good example that we also have a lot of in Namibia is parents who are flying too high. Right? When we were testing the microphones, I started singing "Don't Fly Too High, My Little Bird." But some parents with very good intentions put their kids in a private school, very elite private school that is costing a lot of money. And they work double shifts and extra jobs and so on to pay for that because they want their child to have a better environment to go to school. Or whatever the reason might be. But school fees are not the end of your problems when you put the child in school. There are other events. Now, if you mingle with parents who have 10 times the money that you have, you're not going to afford everything that kids do at school. And your child is going to miss out on many of the activities at school because of money. And that makes the child, from a good home, vulnerable to predators because the child doesn't feel good among her peers. There's always something that she cannot do. The others have better clothes. They can go on all all sorts of school trips and so on that she cannot do. And they get offered opportunities by predators that's hard for them to resist. So that's just an example of the targeting stage. All right, once again, if we have more time, I can tell you a lot about targeting. We do that in our presentations. We study all the bullet points of targeting one by one and how to prevent it. Then meeting the child. Now here's where I want to say, if you know the moves of a predator, if you know how they do things, this is your most likely stage to recognize that something's going on here. There's not always many things that the authorities can do at that stage because the person is just being a good guy at this stage. He's just nice. He's offering a child a lift to school. He's offering the whole community's children lifts to school. Or he's offering that kids could watch TV at his house after school while the moms are still working and they can fetch them when they come from work, and so on. He or she, not always men that are child abusers. Unfortunately, most of the cases that we get are from men. However, women are the more dangerous part because you don't see it coming. We allow women a lot more than we allow men in public. The way a woman can touch a child in public is far different from what we would allow a man to do. If a child has to go to the bathroom, if it's a small child, we would rather allow a woman to take him, whether it's boy or girl, doesn't matter, than a man. So we allow women a lot more because we see the mother figure and we trust that. But there are those that abuse it. I think most of you will know of the advocate Barbie in South Africa. She was actually the one grooming the kids and luring them into the trap. So this is a good stage to intervene, is the meeting. How do they meet? Kids, all sorts of ways. Some of them just meet a group of kids and then target a specific one. Others would first target, then meet. But they would, for instance, like I've said, become a swimming instructor or gymnastics or karate, or they would put up a video shop or a game shop where kids would come after school and those kind of things. That's more or less the way they get the first meeting with the child. I've had one who just moved into a neighborhood and started looking around for kids. And there was one just a few houses from him, and he just walked by every day. That's all. Until he saw the mother outside, and then he greeted the mother. He ignored the child for months. Until he got to know the mother, and then met the child. The mother introduced the child. And that's what I say. If you speak to those mothers afterwards, the tears that they shed will stay with you for life. Friendship forming is just the next stage from meeting the child. If I can leave something with you for tonight, this is not a training. This is not to give you any skills to identify predators. But if I can leave one thing with you tonight, be careful of anyone who does anything nice for kids that is in excess of what you would normally expect from a person. The comment that we hear most often from the community where an abuse has happened is, I always thought there was something wrong with that guy. He was always hugging the kids. It's okay to hug a kid up to a point. But people who cross that line and just go around hugging all the kids that come from school or whatever, keep an eye on them. Or a person that you only know because you've met twice at church suddenly offers to babysit while you go shopping or whatever. It's not normal human behavior. Okay? Don't be suspicious of anyone who's nice to you or your child from now on. But what I'm saying is there is a limit. People are nice, but they can't be so nice, right? We don't have Superman around anymore. So that's the one thing that I look for. Relationship forming, that's very late in the grooming phase. And once you get to that stage, it's your last chance to intervene before your child becomes a victim. But that's now where the person who was friendly to all the kids would start taking one on a weekend trip and leaving the others behind. We had an interesting case a few years ago in Otjiwarongo, where a person two people, two men, who gave themselves out as missionaries, came to a school, and they just had, they were preaching wherever they went, and they made arrangements with a certain school that they will have a short Bible reading and prayer in the morning before the school starts. And they did that for a few months before they organized a trip for kids to Etosha. And the school gave the bus and everything and so on. And about 20 kids went on the trip, and nothing funny happened. Everything was good. They were reading from the Bible to the kids, and they were encouraging them to live good lives and all the good things. And then a month later, they organized the second trip. They sent out invitations again. Now the parents were used to this. It's nothing strange in that. But what the parents didn't know is they invited only two girls, 12 years old. They invited only two girls, gave them cool drinks with drugs in, and molested them. That's how easy it is. One of the parents actually called the other mother, because the two girls were good friends. She said, "Is your child going?" "Yes, she's going." "Okay, fine, then mine can also go." And they thought it's going to be a bus full of kids like the previous time. And that's what happened. So now we get to the next one, and that's the transition to sexual contact. Normally, it could happen like those guys who simply overpowered the kids or drugged them, but mostly it's a gentle process where they start just by touching the arm of the child or giving a hug or tousling the hair or small things. And then it depends on the age of the child. Very young children, they advance very, very fast because the child will just believe everything the grown-up does is good and right. And the child gets used to this kind of behavior. So depending on the age of the child and the resilience of the child, it might take long, it might take only 2 or 3 days. From the very start of the targeting to the sexual contact. The bad thing about the grooming process. The grooming process is often referred to as the training of a horse. Now, if you get a wild horse from the Namibia, you're unlikely to ride it, right? But once someone who knows how has trained that horse, anyone can ride it. Okay? It's the same with kids. Once a child has been groomed by one predator, that child is a sitting duck for any other predator. The child doesn't think it's wrong. And that's why the trauma only comes much, much later, when the child grows up and realizes what has been happening and the trust that she had in this person, and all those kind of things, and what the community might think if they know that she was involved in this and so on. That's when the trauma comes in. Maintaining. This is now the predator after he's done the grooming work. keeping the child happy, buying presents, and so on and so on. There's also a concept of sex tourism, and those guys do the same thing. Just it's not one person who does the grooming, it's successive tourists, and they share their experiences on a certain website with each other. And the person knows, if I come to Windhoek, I'm going to waste my time if I go to this or that part of town. But if I go there and there, kids will more easily accept the gift or more easily get into my car and so on. And then the next guy goes one step further and one step further until eventually the third or the fourth one abuses the child. Now, tourism is a bit quiet at the moment, but when it picks up again, just open up your eyes, walk through the malls, and watch how many 50, 60-year-old men are buying smartphones for 13-year-old girls, Namibian girls, foreign men. Why would they? Why would they? Buying a packet of chips or a few groceries is fine. I can understand if a tourist comes here and sees people who are living in poor conditions and he wants to give them something. But a smartphone for a 13-year-old girl, I don't trust it. That's maintaining, that's what it is. Because she knows when the next tourist comes, she can get something nice from him. Okay? Next slide. All right. The online world. I left the slide just like that. Most of my slides are just pictures and bullets. But this one I put up like this because it's the online world and it's all very artificial. Namibian kids, this study was done in 2017. No, 2015, sorry, 2015. By that time already, 93% of Namibian kids between the ages of 12 and 17 were regularly using the internet. 93%. Not all of them had smartphones or tablets, but they had a friend who had, or at home they had access to the internet, or at school, or at someone's house. Okay? So internet access for kids is almost 100% by now. You can go to Kunene region and you'll see the little Himba boy behind this herd of cattle with a cell phone against his ear, and not any phone, a smartphone. He has internet access all over the country. What do kids do on the internet? They look for health information mostly. Now do yourself a favor and go sit down at your own computer and think how a 13-year-old would search for health information and what he or she would search for. Just go think for yourself what they would and type that in and see where you get. Not only will you end up on porn sites, you'll also be getting these pop-up requests for friendships and stuff from predators. They'll be there, posing as another woman, giving you health information, but they'll be there. The other thing that kids do is, you know, in the old days, you had to find your way around sexual development in your teenage years. Nowadays, kids just Google it. But now they understand that you have a certain identity in the sexual world. So now they go onto some chat rooms and they post or they construct a profile there, and they have to construct a certain identity for themselves. Now they don't want to be seen as old-fashioned or whatever, so they try something risky, right? Lady legs or sexy exy or whatever. They go on these chat rooms already risking themselves by posting themselves in that regard, which obviously attracts the attention of the predators. And then there's a variety of ways that they deal, mostly trying to meet them offline or trying to get them to go on webcam and remove their clothes and do funny things and whatever, which they then record and sell on porn sites. Once again, by the time the girl realizes where this is going, it's too late. The stuff is already on the internet. You can never remove it. It's there forever. 30 years from now, you might be running for president. Someone's going to dig that up. Okay? So, the other thing that kids do online is that they search for help with their schoolwork or study opportunities or bursaries, those kind of things. We have a number of cases in Namibia, which are dead-end cases. We will never trace those people because it happened somewhere online. We don't know even in which country the predator is. But 12 to 14-year-old girls looking for study opportunities. And they get offered bursaries to modeling school, where they can go from age 14 upwards if they are successful candidates. And then obviously they are being asked to turn on their webcams and first to parade in their school uniforms and later on in swimwear and so on. And every time the guy makes them think that they have failed, and, you know, they have 5 million applications and only 50 will be chosen. So every time they think they're out now, and then the guy comes back, hey, wait, you still have a chance. You know, just remove the top of that swimwear. And I can almost certainly guarantee you. And then, yeah, she gets in the final 100 with that and so on. And by the time she's fully naked, he starts asking her to do funny things and so on in front of the webcam. And somewhere the girl will decide this is enough now. How does she stop it? By not communicating with him anymore? Remember the first day, she had to complete an application form. He's just going to send her an email. Oh, thanks for your mom's email address, by the way. So are you going to participate further? Or am I sending everything that I've recorded to your mom? Choice is yours. All right? By that time, it's way too late to go to mom and say, listen, I'm in trouble. Because you have participated. You have started this. It's all the way the girl gets blamed. And she knows it. And she blames herself. She never thinks of the other guy as the bad guy. She blames herself. There's no way out. And then the real abuse starts. Because if you know what's going on in the porn world, the worse and more abusive the actions are, the more expensive the videos. They can sell it for more money. So then things get really out of hand. So we have a number of those cases in Namibia, and it's happening in all communities, once again. Every 12-year-old, 14-year-old wants a better future than what she's having at the moment, okay? The recognition of the content based on Muller and Holloway, that's the Child Witness Institute in South Africa, the two ladies who started it in 1995. They have a number of books that one can order from them. But it's mostly based on specific professions, like they have books for magistrates and for prosecutors and for social workers and for teachers and so on. Now, many of the parents have asked me in the past, should we then ever allow our kids to go on the internet if it's so dangerous? It's a common question. Unfortunately, there's no way out of it. The world has evolved to that point where the internet is our way of communication. It is our way of searching for information. If I tell you to go get me some information on the trees that are growing here, unless you are an expert in the field, the first thing that you will do is you'll go on the internet and you'll search for it there. If you tell a child to do any homework or any project for a school, they can't do it without research on the internet. It's not possible anymore. So how do we do it then? The internet is dangerous, yes, but so is a motor car, so is a firearm. How many Namibian kids cannot fire a firearm? Most of them can shoot. Most of us drive by the time we're 18, okay? There is a way. You have to teach the child that this thing that you're going to deal with now, whether it's a firearm, a motor car, or the internet, has certain inherent dangers attached to it. So to be safe, you can use it, but these are the safeguards that you put in place, right? I remember my dad, when he taught me to shoot, did it with all of us, 3 boys in the house. And the rule was, if I find you with a loaded gun, you will not touch a gun for 12 months, 1 year. And he did that with one of my brothers. And no one else made that mistake ever again. You never keep a loaded gun. You load it when you are about to fire. That was the rule. And that's the same with the internet. You have to have strict rules. Unfortunately, the internet is evolving much faster than us. It's running away from us. We have a cybercrime bill in the country that has not passed through Parliament for 15 years. Why? Because by the time we publish it for public input, the public says, hey, you're outdated, man. Things don't work that way anymore. So it's redrafted, published, redrafted, published, redrafted. It happens over and over. We got experts from all over the world. And all that they said is, we have the same problems in our countries. We just publish the thing and put it through Parliament at some stage so that we have something to work on. And that's what's happened in South Africa. Not very successful. Prosecution on cybercrimes are not very successful anywhere in the world. Few exceptions. What I've shown to you up to this point is a broad outline of programs that I'm now running and teaching to whoever wants to listen. Unfortunately, sponsor money has mostly run out in the country for these kind of programs. When I was still in government service, I've worked on a lot of programs with sponsor money, also on child online protection. It was one of the programs that I've worked on. I have a lot of material on it. However, for the last few years, we were dependent on Namibians to come up with venues, with catering and so on, just to get our professionals to get the opportunity to be trained. So that is a problem at the moment. I am definitely not trying to make money out of this. I'm trying to share information. And if you give me more of your time, I would like to share skills with you, not only information. Many of these things can be dealt with timelessly. So the most basic that I offer is a 3-hour presentation. If you only have weeknights available, if we can do it on a Saturday morning, I would rather make it 5 hours, same presentation, but then I can answer more questions. I can go into detail of examples, because you learn much more from the examples than from the principles that I may teach you. But I have literally thousands of examples of real life cases that I've worked with or that I've studied, from which we can learn how to timelessly deal with these matters, whether it's before or after the abuse. If we can prevent it, that obviously is the first and the most desired outcome. But if it has gone too far and the child has become a victim, let's make that child a survivor and not leave her a victim, okay? There are also programs for that. So 3 to 5 hours. That's what I call preventative parenting. It's general knowledge. It's more or less the topics on this slideshow that we've done now and a few others, but in obviously much more detail than we've done tonight. And it's information. 3 hours, even 5 hours is not enough to teach a skill. Because if I want you to teach you how to consult with a child that you suspect there's something wrong in that child's life, I'll have to do some role play with you and see how you will ask a question and how you will react to certain answers, because that's the biggest problem with grown-ups who don't have the skills. They show the wrong reaction when the child answers, and then the child will shut down. We have another topic which we call disclosure, and that's where we deal with disclosure and consultation skills. Those are the two presentations that where we deal with how to speak to the child. However, we can also do a 5 hours if we have a Saturday morning, but we can also do a weekend seminar. That also will obviously involve more costs, as there's going to be a venue and food and so on. Currently, I have a self-catering option as well, but trust me, I'm gonna tire you down through the day. You don't want to be cooking when you get released by me. I always say to the professionals, if by the end of this week I have not traumatized you, then I haven't done my job. So on a weekend seminar, I won't traumatize you as much, but I'll definitely shock you. So weekend seminars, mostly from Friday night around 6 o'clock up to Sunday just after lunch. And then there we can go into a lot of detail. There we go beyond just information sharing. There we start doing certain activities to better understand some of the concepts and to deal with the situation. Then lastly, for situations where people have suspicion or a fear that the child may have been molested, especially teachers mostly come up with that idea that there's something wrong with this child. Child was always performing well, suddenly falling back, or doing funny things in class, or reacting differently to peers and so on. In those instances, that's where we start with the restorative programs. First of all, that's mostly one-on-one, because people don't like to talk about these things in groups. I have had groups who were willing, but that's mostly adults. Adults who have not dealt with their trauma of 20 or 30 years ago, and they want to deal with it now. And they say, listen, I know of this one, and we're 3, and we are willing to do it together. We have spoken to each other before. So then we can do it in a group. Otherwise, that's a one-on-one consultation where we would first try to evaluate the situation, tell you whether we think that there has been some form of abuse or that the problem might lie somewhere else. And if so, then we can also try to differentiate between sexual abuse and other forms of abuse, because the restorative action would be vastly different for sexual abuse versus other types of abuse. So there are programs in that line. Any of you know of someone who needs, please take my card here. The back of the card says, hello, I'm someone who can help. I don't like titles and funny things on my, that's the way I introduce myself to a child. I don't tell them I'm Deputy Prosecutor General, Advocate, so and so and so. That's just confusing a child. I tell the child, listen, my job is to help you. Whatever noise people outside are making, I'm not going to make noise about whatever happened. I don't know what happened. But whatever happened, I'm not going to make noise about it. I'm going to help you to get an end to the story so that you can move on with your life. So this is my introduction to a child. Hello, I'm someone who can help. So please take a card if you feel the need to. Shortly about costs currently, as I've said, we don't have sponsors now. Any one of you know where we can apply, please tell us. I would love to do this for free for the whole country, but currently we have to cover costs. So the 3-hour presentation, and I would say the same for the 5-hour one, would be around 450 per person. We can talk about the discount if you come as a couple or with a friend or whatever. The weekend seminar will also greatly depend on the venue that we're going to use. Ones that I have available at the moment, we are talking around, what was it? 2,500 for self-catering people and 3,500 with full catering. That's for the whole weekend. So I think that's not a bad price. Even if you go to any lodge, that you're not going to get away much cheaper. Dates that we have in mind at the moment for a Wednesday night, 16 February, I think it's a Wednesday. We will have a presentation from 6 o'clock. If any of you are interested or you know of someone, the return date will be the 15th, the day before. So we'll take bookings up until the 15th. And as I've said before, even if only one person turns up, I'll do the full presentation. I'm there. To me, this is definitely not about numbers or business or anything. This is my passion to share as much information as I can so that I don't have to stick plasters anymore. I want to prevent the wounds. Like in the criminal justice system, we were referring to the child witness program as sticking plasters. And we did that well. It's also necessary. You have to stick plasters when necessary, when the wound is there. But if you can prevent the wound, it's so much better. And then for the weekend, we are talking about 18 to 20 February. So this weekend just after the 16th. So the Wednesday night will be the short version, and then the weekend we will go into more information and a few skills. If anyone of you would like to join us there, you are most welcome. At this stage, I would like to say there's a big problem with the internet society. And that's in all forms of abuse, the secrecy element is always the big problem. But that picture says it all. Your own actions is bouncing back from that screen and shutting you up so that you can't tell anyone. Because you've gone too far by the time you realize something is wrong. So I don't think I need to elaborate on that anymore unless we have questions. Thank you very much for your attention. Floor is open for any questions that you may have.
Thank you for the Parent Council for stay and even
Schools any institution is welcome to call me. They have Ministry of Health and Ministry of Gender have called me on several occasions, sometimes for the whole program, sometimes just for a certain part. Because for professionals, obviously, I have court procedures and report writing and court preparation and supporting a vulnerable witness in court and those kind of presentations that I wouldn't give to the general public. But yes, institutions are welcome to make arrangements. And then obviously, if they have the venue and they can organize the catering and so on, the cost would be very low per person. Also bigger groups, we can also obviously cut down on costs. But institutions are more than welcome to contact me. And as I've said, many have already.
On the 16th of February, where is it going to be?
That one will be at Van Finkenstein, 15 minutes drive out.
The best way to contact you, you prefer email or call, a cell phone call?
I'd prefer email because that way I can't lose your name and number.
I have a question. While I will still be getting to consult you, as I'm a father, I have a 3-year-old daughter, she's turning 3 in March. There is possibly no way, of course, there could be signs, could not be signs, but this, how best can you look out for predators inside the household or the neighborhood? Besides now the gifting and the extraordinary niceness that's there, besides that, what else can I look out for?
Once again, I'll have to teach you with practical activities how to do it, because just telling you to look out for a person who's nice, there are many nice people in society. We can't start suspecting them all. It's not something I can answer in a few minutes or so. It's going to take a few hours. We're going to play around with examples and then you will better understand. Anyone else? Sure.
I don't know if you'd have any experience in this, but you know, the way one could rehabilitate a drug addict or an alcoholic, can one rehabilitate predators?
I actually do have experience in that. I was part of a program. So far, I'll have to differentiate between the different types of predators. Actively involved in child abuse, pedophiles who are actively involved in child abuse have never been successfully rehabilitated. Occasional abusers and so on, and you also have pedophiles who are not abusing children. They are inclined to do it. They have the how can we put it? Like you, predisposition could be a word, but I would rather say like you have a sexual orientation. It's more like that. They have a sexual orientation towards children. They don't have sexual interest in adults, but they are not active. It's like kleptomaniacs who never steal. They control themselves. Those ones are, you can rehabilitate them to a great extent, but active pedophiles have not been successfully rehabilitated so far. That's what I can say. Aldi?
Neighbor who has an idea that something is wrong with a certain child, pupil, household to do.
All right. Let me tell you what not to do. Something that happened in a school here in Windhoek. Child is showing signs over sexualization at the age of 9, which is a definite sign. So a teacher informs the principal, listen, we have a problem here. Okay, now we've had 2 cases of that nature. One instance, the principal didn't want to damage the name of the school and just kept it quiet and told the teacher to tell the child to behave herself. That ended badly, with the child swallowing a bottle of pills in class. She was without pulse, without breathing, when luckily my wife was around and picked her up and revived her. Thereafter, they went to investigate, and it was found that there was a problem at home. But that's one thing not to do. Don't ignore it. That's the first thing. The second thing that happened in another school, they started off well by calling a social worker, making sure that the social worker was well trained in this field, because social workers are good at consulting, but not all of them have been trained on how to consult a victim of abuse, especially sexual abuse. It's a very sensitive topic, and it's not all of them who have that training. But they called the right person. But then when the social worker stopped at school, the headmaster called the child over the intercom. Hi, Lily, there's a social worker here who wants to talk to you. Okay. Why is that such a bad thing? Because now the whole school was asking questions. She was stigmatized. She shut down. She never spoke a word. All right. So keep it very private, first of all. Call a social worker. Call me if you're not sure which social worker to call. I can, in many instances, I can guide you to the right people by talking to the grown-ups or to the people who saw the signs. I can differentiate and see which way we are going with this, and I can direct you to the right people. I don't do counseling, but I can do a forensic interview. I can get disclosure from a child. We've had the case where a child that has been found to be molested, physical signs were very clear. She had been physically raped at the age of 6. She never spoke to anyone. Her mother tried everything. She didn't want to talk to the mother. Social worker were counseling her for 6 years, up until the time she was 12. A case was registered with the police. It went to court, but we couldn't proceed because the child wasn't ready to talk. She just kept quiet. Whenever you spoke about it, she kept quiet. She didn't say a single word. Then the prosecutor dealing with that case, now he had to beg the court for more postponements to get the child to talk. And he was putting pressure on the social worker. Do your job, get the child to talk. The social worker did not succeed. We had that prosecutor on one of my trainings, and I taught him interviewing skills. And he went back on that Monday morning. The case was on the roll the very next week after the training. He went back Monday morning, sat down with that child. 10 o'clock, they were in court. 1 o'clock, we had a conviction. It was like that. After 6 years of silence, just by one person who had been properly trained, the girl spoke out, and we could get a conviction on that case. All right, from there, she was open. Now she had spoken about it. Now we could send her back to the social worker for counseling afterwards. The case was more severe, so the social worker eventually referred her to a psychologist. So we also have steps in the restorative program. So my job is to evaluate, to see where we need to go. If need be, I can speak to the child as well. Or I can bring someone with me who can do that. Some kids don't talk to men at all, especially girls who've been abused by men. They simply don't talk to a man. Others will talk only to a man because they believe a woman won't be strong enough to face the abuser. Okay, so You have to evaluate first what the child is comfortable with. But the best way to go would be either call me or call your nearest social worker. Government social workers have been better trained than anyone else in this country. So don't be afraid of government officials in this regard. They have been very well trained, most of them. And you can ask them, the program is the child witness program. You can ask your social worker, when have you been on child witness training? If they say, not yet, ask them to refer you to someone who has been. Those social workers, they get super results with kids.
If you, for example, in grade 2 find a child where you think there is problems at home, and you go to the social worker and is it not worse for the child at home later with a follow-up thing than if a child would have kept quiet?
That's why I say don't ever talk to someone who hasn't been properly trained. Because if you deal with it correctly, it won't be. That's why we need to evaluate the situation. That's one of the things that we evaluate, is what would be the responses at home. Let me give you an example. We had a 15-year-old girl who came to lay a charge. She spoke to a teacher first. Most of them speak to teachers first. It's most of our first reports come from teachers. The girl spoke to the teacher first. The teacher brought her to the police. By the way, the police also have a women and child protection unit, and most of their officers are also very well trained. When the case came to court, that girl was the only witness. It's very hard to get a rape case convicted on a single witness. It's very, very, very hard. Even with all the fancy laws that we have in place today, it's very hard. But she was such a good witness. She was solid. Okay, we had her through a program where a social worker did court preparation with her. So she knew what she was going to face. She knew what was going to be asked of her. She knew she had to explain every gruesome detail in an open court before professional people. It's a hard thing to do, but she did all of that. She faced cross-examination from a very seasoned lawyer, one of the best in the country. And the guy was convicted on her evidence. It was strong, solid evidence. He went to jail. 4 years later, when she was 19, she came back and she said, I've put an innocent man in jail. Please release him. I sat down with her. She had already made a statement to the police that her first testimony was false, and she was only mad at her stepfather because he didn't want her to go out with boys. And that's why she made the case against him. However, when I sat down with her and I talked to her, my first question was, how's it going at home? There's no food. The whole family is blaming her for putting the guy in jail, and so on. I said to her, I know what you're facing, but do you know that you could go to jail if you now change your story because you've lied on the oath? Or you are now lying, or then, doesn't matter. It's two statements under oath that are differing from each other. She said, so be it. Just let him come home and provide for the family. So it could go bad at home, even if you go through the court process. So therefore, I say, before you decide which steps to take. When I was a prosecutor, it was my job to tell everybody, make a case at the police, and we'll deal with it in court. I didn't do that. I didn't tell everyone to go to the police, because it's not always the best. Yes, if it's a predator that's out there and who's going to molest a lot of other kids, be strong, do your part, put him behind bars. But then we need to intervene in the situation at home. We need to know what's going to happen at home. We need the social worker to work on the situation at home before we put the guy in jail. So there are a lot of things to consider, and each situation will differ from the other. But that is a definite risk that you need to manage from the start. I don't say don't do anything because there's a risk involved. I'm saying manage that risk right from the start.